Okay, hello and welcome. This is a new video series that I shall be starting where I'm going to be looking at some sample libraries and showing you how I incorporate them into my template and how I use them in my compositions. Now, I am mainly a library music and trailer music composer, and so that is where the focus of these videos is going to be. Now, we're going to kick things off with Albion One from Spitfire Audio. This is a hybrid orchestral library, meaning that they blend traditional orchestral recordings and more synthetic processed sounds. It's an ensemble library, meaning that they have recorded the groups of instruments as families rather than individual instruments. So instead of violins and viola and cello and double bass, you just have one big strings patch. Now, the way these videos are going to work is I have recorded a track using the library, and we're going to take a listen to that track, and then afterwards we're going to take a closer look at my template and the library itself and how I've used it to write this piece. So let's take a listen to the track. Okay, so that was the track. Pretty standard epic orchestral track, and that is what this library is designed to make. That is what Spitfire market it as. So let's take a little look at the structure and the musical content very quickly before we dive a bit deeper into the template and how I use the library to write this piece. So it is a pretty standard structure. It's an AABA format with a little outro at the end. So basically two sections, an A section and a B section. The A section is where the main musical ideas are, the main theme, the main chord progression, and I'm using the B section as like a variation of that theme, and it's there to just kind of break up the listening fatigue you might get from just listening to 3A sections, just repeating over and over again the same ideas. So We start off with the first A section, which is basically like an intro. The second A section is just kind of developing the ideas, bigger orchestration, more layers, more instrument layers, more kind of percussive elements and rhythmical ideas. Then, like I say, the B section is kind of like taking it in a different direction, is just a variation on the theme, still using the same chords, just in a different sequence, and introducing different instruments such as the brass, the percussion, and some little kind of tick-tocky percussions down here. And then we have a tiny little break, just kind of to intensify or emphasize the intensity of the next section. And the next section is like the big finale. That's where everything's playing. We all have all the orchestral instruments, plus synths, plus percussion, bit of choir. This is kind of the big epic finale. And then, like I say, just a little outro at the end, which is just the intro copy and pasted over to the end, minus some of these synthesized sounds. Now, the musical content, very, very simple idea here. It's just a 8 chord progression. And let's just click that there. Using 3 chords. And those chords are C, F minor, C, C, F minor, G. Very, very simple. I don't know what key it's in. Starts with a C major, but then has an F minor in it. So I'm guessing some kind of mode. I don't know what. But it sounded good when I started mucking around and playing it, so I went with it. The melody, again, very, very simple. It's just following the chord tones of the chord progression. And so it sounds a little something like this. Like I say, very simple chord progression, very simple melody, very simple structure. And I've just kind of spread this out over 3 minutes just by moving the harmony, the chords and the melody around with different instruments, different instrument groups, using different articulations. Sometimes the chords are being played with short articulations, doing arpeggio, sometimes with block chords, with long articulations. And in the end, this melody, because it rises up here to the B as part of the G major chord, that leads quite nicely back into the E, just on a higher octave, and that lends itself to raising the intensity of the track by actually raising the pitch, which I do in this third section, the big epic section. Just everything kind of rises up, and the same with the chord progression. As in the third section, I kind of create inversions by taking the bottom notes and sending them up an octave, and it just kind of raises the whole chord progression up in pitch, which is a useful technique for increasing the intensity of a track. So yeah, like I say, very simple chord progression, very simple melody, very simple structure. Right, so let's take a little look at the template. So what I've done here is I've created a blank template, and I'm going to go into this template in a bit more detail in another video. But what I've done is I've just created pre-routed groups for all of the different kind of sounds that you might find in a trailer music or library music piece. And a lot of these are hidden because they're not needed in Albion One. A lot of these sounds aren't present in Albion One. So we've got all the things like, pulses and drones and Brahms and guns. And none of these are actually in Albion. Well, some of these are, but I've decided not to use the groups. For instance, I've got a synth group here that I've bunged all of the kind of like synthetic process sounds from Albion, but I could have split that up into other groups such as pads and ARPs and drones, but I didn't. I just decided to put them all into synths for this particular project. So in my blank template, I've got a bunch of spares here as well, groups. In my blank template, there is no instruments loaded. There's just a blank instrument. Oh, this one actually does have an instrument loaded, but let's go to a different one instead. Let's go to that one. It's just a blank instrument. And so what I have done with these libraries, and in this one in particular, Albion One, is I have saved all of the presets in the contact library as individual presets in the Logic browser, and I've used the same folder structure as you find in Contact. So we go take a little look here in Contact. This is how it loads up. This is the interface. But if we take a little look in Contact, you'll see this is the initial folder structure that you'll find when you first open up the library, and it is the same folder structure I have here. I've added an extra folder. This is just the groups that I've created in this template. So if I ever wanted to just load an entire track stack with the Albion woodwinds as I've set them up in this template, then I can just go into track stacks and load them up from here. But other than that, the folder structure I have here in the Logic browser is exactly the same as it is in Contact. And the idea here is when I load up a blank template and it has all of these different groups, I can just go into whichever group that I'm using. I have, for instance, woodwinds, and I can just copy and paste the blank instruments and then just load up the instrument patches as and when I need them, and create a template that way. And it's a very, very fast way of building a template. Building templates before in projects used to take me hours, but having this blank template pre-routed the way I wanted, and it is pre-routed the way I wanted, because all of these groups, except for the spares, even the hidden ones, they are all routed to print buses, and then those print buses are routed to audio channels down here, which is in my stems folder, pre-routed to audio channels, and then those audio channels, or those print buses are then further routed into these audio channels, which are your alt mixes. So you have all of your stems and all of your alt mixes, so your no instrument, no percussion, no choir, and then your full mix. And so what you can do is you can just record everything, your stems and your alt versions, all in one pass, just by clicking record and record enabling the various appropriate audio channels. So for this, we've got woodwinds, we've got brass, we've got percussion, we've got cymbals, we've got choirs, we've got keys, strings, synths. What else we've got? We've got booms. We've got TikToks, not down as TikToks. We've got transitions. Then we've got our alt mixes, which is no instruments, no percussion, no choir, and full mix. And then once they're all record enabled, just hit record. And that's just recorded everything, the stems and the alt mixes all in one go. Obviously, if you do the whole pass, then it will do the whole track. And then it just saves time, because before, actually no, we won't bother. We'll just hide it again. Before with Logic, if you didn't have things routed correctly, if you didn't have like your send effects, return channels going back into your track stack, and then if you didn't have it routed to print buses, then back into audio channels, you'd basically have to hit solo every time you wanted to bounce a stem, and then bounce that stem all individually, and then you'd have to do the alt mixes as well by muting the different bits that needed to be muted. And it's just time consuming. And the same with template building. If you didn't have everything saved, or if you don't have everything saved over here, and you wanted to build a template using Albion One, you have to go in and load up the contacts and then duplicate them, create the different track stacks, and it's all just very time consuming. Having a blank universal template with everything pre-routed, and then having all your patches ready to just load straight away in the Logic browser, it's just very time saving. And if you're someone like me who does this as a part-time gig, you've got like a full-time job on and your family and other commitments, and you're just trying to every second counts, you know. Every little bit of time you have counts, and if you're spending that time template building or stemming, then it's time you're not spent composing. So I find this a real time saver. Okay, so let's take a little look at the library and how I've used it. So we'll just take a quick look at the interface. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because there's many videos out there that show how Albion is used and all the different sounds that it has. So this is the interface that loads up. I've loaded up the strings patch here. As you can see, we've got some microphone placements here, close and far. It's all recorded in Air Studios, and so the close and far is how much of the baked-in reverb of the room of Air Studios you're using. All your articulations down here, they're all labelled here: spiccato, staccato, pizzicato, collegno, some longs, tremolos, these are good ones. These are low octaves. I use those quite a bit, and these are low octaves long. And then you have some controls. These are the kind of the common controls that you would use, because this is the basic interface. Dynamics, that's probably the most important thing. Lots of people would say, and myself included, that when you play a part, you would have one hand playing the notes and another hand controlling the dynamics with your mod wheel. That sounded awful. I should play something nice. Nicer. So yeah, that's probably the most important control in the entire interface. You can also, if you've got more faders that you can use, I'm just using the mod wheel here, you could also have the expression to make it even more expressive and even more emotive. A bit of reverb. I don't use it. I've got reverbs in my template, and a bit of vibrato. I should be using that more. If you automate that, it creates a more realistic performance, but I don't tend to. Then you have an expert view. When I was using this to move the orchestra, like give it more reverb, move it closer or far away, what it's basically doing is blending these different microphone positions. So you've got close mics, tree mics, ambient mics, and outrigger mics, and you can control what level each one is at. Obviously the close mics is very dry sound, tree mics is a bit more reverb, that's where the conductor stands. Ambient mics, they're right up in the rafters apparently, and that's like the most reverby sound, and outriggers is kind of in between them. And so like I say, you can just blend all of these different mic positions together to create the kind of sound that you want of the room. You can also turn off the articulations here in the expert view, which saves on RAM, saves on CPU. Or you can do as I do and just load up individual patches. What you can also do in this, but if you press Shift, you can also layer up different sounds. So that's pizzicatos layered with longs. I'm not sure you'd ever use that, but if you wanted to, you could. Again, I tend to use these individual articulations over here, the individual instruments, and I just layer them by duplicating a track in my template and just layering them that way. And I have actually done that in this track. And then you have a few more controls over here. Again, I don't really use them. Tightness. When you record orchestral instruments, there's a slight delay in between when the player first starts playing and the kind of peak of the first transient. And you can control that with the tightness. I don't do that. I tend to use track delay in Logic's track thing here. And if you put in a negative delay, -60 usually works for most orchestral instruments. And that does pretty much the same thing as tightness. Tightness will actually just move the start time of the sample. And you also have a release, which is, you know, the release of the sample, so it'll have a tiny bit of tail even without the reverb and without the room. You also have, if you want a short articulation, you also have this ostinatum, which is kind of like a fancy arpeggiator that you can choose which notes of the chord play at what time and which time interval as well. So that's pretty cool. And you can also do the velocity as well, so you can create some pretty cool ostinatos and arpeggios using that. Again, I don't tend to use that. I just program in my own ostinatos. So this is the strings. You also have what we have here. Let's link them together. There we go. We also have brass, exactly the same interface. We've got some short, some longs, and some octaves. Then we have brass low. They have the normal again, but we also have these nasty articulations, which is basically like cuivre playing technique. Brass mids, that's basically your French horns. Highs is your flutes and your oboes. But if you have the arranged, I'm pretty sure the arranged has some clarinets playing an octave below, I think. I could be wrong, but that's what it sounds like. Then you have your woods low. Then you have your Darwin ensemble. This is your percussion, just some mostly lows, but there's some sticks in there as well, and some anvils and stuff at the top. And it's quite like toms and grand casses and stuff like that. Sub hits, I'm not sure what they are, but you also have another sub hit patch here called Easter Islands, which I use. I'll put it in my booms group here, and some toms and some XSL percussion. So these are all just basically epic percussions. And you've got some legacy patches up here as well, which is cymbals and gongs, because this is actually a remake of an older library, Albion, which is one of the first libraries they released. And inside the library, they do have legacy patches. So in the Darwin percussion, they have these legacy patches, which is the cymbals. And then in the actual main folder structure, you also have the Albion legacy, which is just patches that they really liked from the old library, which is most of the orchestral stuff. And then you can see some of these individual patches, which I've used in this piece as well, because I do like some of these older recordings. So yeah, that's the percussion. Then this is kind of more the synthetic stuff. This is their kind of eDNA engine. And so you have these two bays where you can load in sounds. And there's a whole bunch of presets that come with it. They're mostly pads, but there's some other stuff in there as well. And then you have this kind of engine that you can use to kind of process the sound. So you have these kind of LFOs that are stuck on sine waves, pre-mapped to pitch volume filter on both of the two bays, A and B. Then you have filters on both the bays, some tuning, some pans, some trim, some offset. You can crossfade between the two bays. You have some envelopes just for the amplitude, the volume of it. Then they have this gator effect, and then a whole bunch of FX. More effects in here. And yeah, like I say, they have a whole bunch of presets that you can use, which is mostly what I do. They're, like I say, they're mostly pads. But then you can just come in here and you can switch out sounds, or you could load up the dev kit, the developer's kit, which just loads up every sound. Because these aren't all the sounds, I don't think. These are just these are all the additional sounds for this particular patch or this particular set of patches. But if you load up the dev kit, you'll have access to all of them, and you can just swap out the sounds or just make up your own from scratch. And then process it however you want with this kind of little synth engine that they've got as part of it. Obviously, read the manual to get a better idea on how to use this. I just tend to use the presets because I'm always in a rush. And they do sound pretty good, especially just lying underneath the orchestral parts. They're just kind of complementing them, which is what hybrid orchestral libraries are supposed to do. And then we also have the Brunel loops, similar engine, but instead of recordings of single sounds, you have these little loops, which are kind of percussion loops. Most of them are like tinkly, tick-tocky, kind of high-end, just kind of quite fast-paced loops, just to kind of add a little bit of pace to your tracks and sit up there in the high end, like tambourines and bells and blocks, stuff like that. And they are incredibly useful, just to add that tiny little bit of extra pace on top of the percussion. You also have in the library as well, you should probably take a quick look, like for instance in the orchestra library, you have these cog patches that kind of changes the start time of the, you can change the start time of the samples with a little cog control. Combinations, I don't use these a lot, but these are basically mixing like woodwinds with brass or strings with brass. When you're working with live music and trading music and you have to do individual stems, having mixtures of sounds like that, probably not that useful, or I wouldn't have any use for it. I'm guessing if you're working in TV or library music for adverts and stuff where they don't really want stems, then you could use those as a quick way of orchestrating stuff. Individual patches I use a lot. All of my templates are just using individual patches rather than these kind of multi-patched articulation patches where you'd use key switches to switch between them. I don't use those, I use the individual ones. Then you have your legato patches. They're mostly in octaves, except for the woods and mid strings and mid brass, which is the French horns. You can have those as individuals as well. Like see here, they're mostly in octaves. So they're mostly for epic music. That's where you would use octave legatos. Run patches, that's just the strings, although in the legacy patches there are some woodwind runs as well, which I've used in this. And Time Machine, I think this is just to create better, more realistic timing. It uses the time stretch feature inside Contact to so when you're changing tempos, and the short notes just are a bit more in time as you're like changing tempos. If you've got like a really fast tempo, if you're actually changing tempo within the track. Yeah, and that's everything from the library that I'm going to cover. Obviously you can go into a lot more detail if you go watch the other videos that Spitfire have done. Let's take a look at what I've done in this track. I should probably tell you that I'm using Contact 6 and I'm using Logic, I think it's 10.7.4 I think I'm using, something like that. It's not the latest one that just came out a couple of weeks ago. It's the one before that. So we start off the track with the A section. This is the intro, and it's just starting off with this piano. Now this isn't part of Albion, but this is a free piano. It's Labs soft piano, so you can just go download it from the Spitfire website for free. I also use the Labs choir. It doesn't really do a lot for the track, the Labs choir. I've just put it in there to demonstrate the stemming of the no choir mix that you can get. So anyway, it starts off with the piano, and it's also layered up with this Visitors, which is a glockenspiel. It doesn't actually have tuned percussion, but they do have it as part of the Stevenson's band. And then we also have this drone that's coming through. And as you increase the mod wheel automation, the drone kind of uses the gate effect that's part of the Stevenson's Steam band, and it creates kind of a pulse. And then in come the pizzicato strings. Just doing a simple little kind of backwards and forwards pattern, and a little umpa pattern in the low end, and then that's just straight eighth notes, just playing the chord tones in the spiccatos. And these are legacy patch spiccatos. I've used the ones from the original. It's called ostinatum spiccatos, and they're just a little bit shorter, a little bit more percussive than the ones that come with the new library. And that's it for the intro. It's just the piano just kind of sketching out the chord progression with the bass notes and the melody in the high notes, and then the harmony being played by the strings with some kind of droney stuff going on in the background. Okay, then in the second part, the second A section, we have the woodwinds coming in with that same pizzicato arrangement, and we also have the where we go. We also got the continuing the spiccato strings as well. So this, I suppose, it really the piano as well. This is all kind of like the rhythmical tonal elements of this section. So that's just playing the same patterns as the pizzicato strings down here, and then, like I say, the piano is still playing the same part as playing before. I've added a kind of a pulse to the piano here. It's just playing the root note, and then it changes on that G major chord change there, just so it's a bit more in tune. But that is all the rhythmical elements of the second A section. You've still got this pulse going on down here. And then for the kind of like the longer articulations, the strings are coming in now. And we have the melody being played with some legato mid strings, so probably violas. And then we have the long strings. As you can see, it's just chord progression that's gradually rising up, and the melody is rising up as well. That's this top line, I think. Oh no, the melody is staying where it is. What happens with the melody is the woodwinds come in. And they are playing the higher notes coming up here. So yeah, a rising chord progression, rising melody. And that's kind of like the long articulations, and we've also used some of the Stevenson Steam Band pads, which is just kind of emphasizing those chord changes, just adding a little extra texture, a little difference in the timbre. It's kind of like a glassy bell-like pad. And we also have that glockenspiel again. And that's all like the long articulations, playing the melody and the chords, the chord progression, and everything together is just. So like the piano's playing a bit of the melody, the short strings and the long strings, and the short words are playing the harmonies, and then we have the whiz legato and the strings legato, and the visitor also playing the melody. We also have a little bit of percussion going on here. It's just some Easter Island booms, and I've kind of taken away a lot of the high end. I've really pulled them back, so it literally is just the sub boom you're hearing there. But we also have these in the transitions. We have these swells, which is basically like a Grand Casa bass drum roll, and then the Easter Island boom sits over the top of that just to make it a bit more kind of subby. And then right at the end we have this cymbal roll as well that leads into the B section. And we also have, as a transition, like I said to you earlier, one of the legacy patches is in fact woodwind runs, which again just creates like a little mini crescendo. And that leads into the B section. Now the B section, the main kind of thing that sticks out straight away is these little percussive loops that come in, and also the percussion there. We might as well put the cymbals in, just do all of the percussion. We've got those booms and the swells down here, transients. So that tick-tocky sound, and these percussion is just very understated in the background. That's the kind of standout sounds that would stand out from the beginning. Then for the long articulations, doing like the harmonies, like I say, this is different. This is a variation on the theme, so it's a different chord progression, but it's using the same chords. And the brass is coming in now, and we also have this long strings, and I've kind of layered up some more long strings there. As you can see, these are the first long strings down here, and then this little bit here is this up here an octave. And the tremolo strings, they aren't really doubling up the long strings. I doubled them up in this section because I wanted like a shimmering effect over the long strings. Here the tremolos are just doing these long sustained notes with this long gradual increase in intensity from the mod wheel automation, and I'm using it kind of like a riser. But yes, so it is just the brass and the strings doing like the long notes. We've got big pedal notes for the low strings with some kind of chord tones over the top, and then the brass up here is playing the chord progression, or a chord progression using the same chords. It's just gradually increasing intensity because it's kind of dipped after this little mini crescendo, and now it's gradually increasing up. And it's kind of leading into this last section where the brass kind of take over the main show, as it were. And then for the short articulations, we've got the piano, that pulse that I created, and we've got some pizzicato strings that are kind of doing a kind of a descending ostinato pattern using chord tones, but not following the chord progression. And that's kind of doubled up with some spiccato strings doing a similar descending, but with double notes instead of single notes. And also the woodwinds as well are kind of double up it. They double up that same pattern and also add in the pattern that they were playing before. Again, following the chord progression. Whole thing. Oh yeah, and I didn't mention that there's another little Brunel loop, tinkle tinkle, coming in here, tick tock and a tinkle tinkle. Again, just helping add to the intensity of the build-up. And we also have another pulse that's kind of complementing this pulse here. Again, it's another Stevenson band. Just adding a bit of rhythmic texture. It's like a drone and a pulse at the same time. So okay, so then we move into the main section, and we've got a lot going on here. The pizzicato strings take a bow out for the first time. So the spiccato strings take over the rhythmical tonal aspects, along with the piano. And we also have some brass, high brass trumpets playing a kind of like a fanfare without that final note. You'll see what I mean. And some short woodwinds as well. That's taking care of all of the short stuff. And it's a very simple pattern. It's just eighth notes patterns, and just the changes in velocity creates the rhythm. So we have these accents coming in at the beginning of every couple of bars, and then like a double accent, and then just low velocity notes after that, and that's where the rhythm comes from for the short parts. And then, like I say, we've got this high brass. It's almost like a fanfare without the long sustained note at the end, which you usually get with fanfares. But it just complements these. These short notes. All playing very similar patterns, slightly different accents in different places, just to create a bit more interest. And then for the sustain notes, we have the whiz legato playing the melody, and like I mentioned earlier, it gradually rises up because that B leads nicely back up into the E for the second pass of the melody at a higher octave. And we've got the long brass doing the same. So the long brass, it starts off with French horns, moves up into trumpets, and then we've also got the long strings down here, strings legato. This is the full legato patch, and it just moves up. These are all the Modwell automation lanes that I've got going on. Recorded most of the Modwell automation in myself, like actually performing it. Some of it I was a bit lazy and just drew in some like swells, which is pretty easy to do. So underneath that melody, we also have the strings, the long strings, and the tremolo strings layered once again there. And we also have the brass. Just chord tones playing part of the chord sequence. And we also have the choir, but you can't really hear that. Also underpinning it, we have some of the synth stuff from Stevenson Steam Band. I use this Epic to Epica patch, which is basically strings, and that's kind of rising in a rising kind of chord progression that's rising in pitch. And we've also got that patch from earlier, the glassy patch. And the drone and the glockenspiel patch. And then we also have these little string ones. These are, you can't really hear them, but they just add a little extra texture. Just sitting in the background. If you really know they're there and you listen for them, you can hear them, but they do get a bit lost in the mix. I just quite like that little textual addition. And then we also have these big cymbals and percussion. Percussion actually comes in a bit more powerful now. Here it's quite understated in the B section. Here it's a bit more powerful. And we have these Brunel loops as well. And I really love the gongs in this library. Really has that kind of like film score, cinematic quality to it, and those gongs in there. And the percussion is basically just acting as punctuation for into the outro, which, like I say, is just the beginning again, minus this pulse. And then we still have these booms, and we still have these swells that we had before. And that's it. That is the track. A simple chord sequence, a simple melody, just stretched out by layering, moving stuff around the different instruments, putting in a little bit of a refrain, a kind of like a variation, so it doesn't get too tiring to listen to. And just making sure the whole thing builds from something small up until something large at the end, gradually increasing its intensity as you go along. And that is it. Right, if you like this video and you want to see some more, I've got plenty more libraries. I can do more tracks and more track dissections. So yeah, subscribe and like and leave some comments. If you like the template, if you want the blank one, there's a link down below. You can download that for free, and you can just load whatever instruments you want, and everything will be pre-routed, and you can do all your stemming and your alt mixes all in one go, like I showed. And there'll be a separate video showing that in more detail. And if you like the way that I can build templates very quickly using these Logic presets, then yes, you can purchase the Albion template and all of the presets for this library. Obviously you have to have the library first. No actual sounds are included, but yes, it's $10-15 I think. Yeah, $10 I think. I've got it on the store, and you can download all of the patches and just build your templates really quickly like I have. So yes, thanks for watching. I hope you've got something from this, and I will see you next time.